There are moments in history that refuse to stay in the past, events so strange, so utterly inexplicable. They linger like whispers in the dark, defying every attempt at rational explanation. Picture this, a village vanishing overnight, leaving behind nothing but empty homes and cold hearths. A battle fought in the sky by phantom soldiers, witnessed by hundreds. Objects moving on their own as if guided by unseen hands. These aren't scenes from a ghost story, they're real accounts etched into the records of our world, yet forever beyond our understanding. Today, we're stepping into the shadows of history, where the line between fact and the supernatural blurs into something far more mysterious. For centuries, historians and scientists have tried to unravel these enigmas, only to find themselves staring into the abyss of the unknown. What if I told you there are at least 25 documented events, each one stranger than the last, that still send chills down the spines of experts? From cursed artifacts with deadly reputations to entire civilizations disappearing without a trace, these aren't just footnotes in a dusty textbook. They're puzzles waiting to be solved, secrets begging to be uncovered. And the most haunting part, some of these mysteries aren't just confined to the past. There are those who claim they're still happening, as if time itself has folded, allowing the unexplained to bleed into our present. So why do these stories captivate us so deeply? Maybe it's the thrill of the unknown, the tantalizing possibility that there's more to our world than meets the eye. Or perhaps it's the unsettling realization that, despite all our advancements, some things remain beyond our grasp. Whatever the reason, one thing's certain: by the end of this journey, you'll never look at history the same way again. Because these aren't just tales, they're reminders that the past is alive with questions, and some of them might never have answers, ready to step into the unknown. Let's begin. In the summer of 1518, the streets of Strasbourg became the stage for one of history's most baffling tragedies. It began with a lone woman, Frau Trophia, stepping into the square and dancing as if possessed. Within days, dozens, then hundreds joined her, their bodies convulsing to a rhythm only they could hear. They twirled, gasped, and collapsed, their feet bloodied, yet still they danced. Some never stopped, their hearts giving out under the strain. This was the dancing plague, a real-life nightmare that defies explanation even 5 centuries later. What could drive ordinary people to dance themselves to death? One theory points to ergot, a toxic fungus that grows on damp rye, capable of causing hallucinations and spasms. It's the same substance linked to the Salem witch trials, and in Strasbourg, spoiled grain might have triggered a collective delirium. But skeptics argue the symptoms don't quite match. Those afflicted weren't just disoriented, they were compelled, as if an unseen force gripped them. Others propose mass psychogenic illness, a wave of hysteria so potent it spread like a virus. Imagine the terror of watching your neighbors succumb, then feeling your own limbs betray you, dancing not out of joy but desperation. Yet the darkest question remains: why dancing? In medieval Europe, dance was both celebration and penance. Some historians believe the plague was a twisted echo of St. Vitus dance, a term for erratic movements blamed on divine punishment. Desperate townspeople even built a stage, hiring musicians to play faster, hoping the dancers would exhaust themselves. Instead, the music seemed to fuel them, as if the cure had become part of the curse. To this day, no single theory fully explains why Strasbourg streets became a macabre ballroom, only that for those who lived it, the horror was as real as the cobblestones beneath their bleeding feet. On a quiet summer morning in 1908, something tore through the sky over Siberia with the force of 1,000 suns. The explosion that followed, now known as the Tunguska Event, flattened 80 million trees across 800 square miles of wilderness, sending shockwaves that shattered windows hundreds of miles away. Eyewitnesses described a fireball brighter than the sun, a column of smoke towering into the atmosphere, and a deafening roar that echoed across the tundra. Yet when scientists finally reached the remote site, they found no crater, no smoking gun, just a silent, scorched landscape twisted into eerie geometric patterns. Theories erupted like the blast itself. Most scientists point to a cosmic culprit, a meteor or comet fragment exploding midair, its energy vaporizing before impact. Calculations suggest it detonated 5 miles above the ground with the force of 10 to 15 megatons, roughly 1,000 times more powerful than Hiroshima. But skeptics note the absence of extraterrestrial debris, fueling wilder speculation. Could it have been a chunk of antimatter annihilating on contact with Earth's atmosphere, or a black hole passing through our planet like a bullet through tissue? Even Nikola Tesla's name surfaces in whispers. Some claim his experiments with wireless energy transmission might have accidentally unleashed devastation from his lab half a world away. What makes Tunguska so haunting isn't just the scale of destruction, but the lingering uncertainty. If it happened today over a major city, millions would vanish in an instant. And the terrifying truth, we still don't know how to stop it from happening again. Modern telescopes scan the skies for threats, yet objects like Tunguska's visitor, small, dark, and fast, could slip through undetected until it's too late. The event stands as a humbling reminder. For all our technology, we're still at the mercy of forces beyond our control, waiting for the next cosmic mystery to ignite the sky. Deep in the vaults of Yale University sits a book that laughs in the face of modern understanding. The Voynich Manuscript, a 200-page relic from the 15th century, is written entirely in a script no one has ever deciphered, accompanied by illustrations of plants that don't exist and celestial charts that match no known sky. Its vellum pages whisper secrets in looping, alien handwriting, while baffling diagrams hint at everything from herbal medicine to cosmological mysteries. For over 600 years, codebreakers, linguists, and even wartime cryptographers have tried and failed to crack its meaning. Was it an elaborate medieval prank, a lost language, or something far stranger? The manuscript first surfaced in the court of Emperor Rudolph II, who reportedly paid 600 gold ducats for it, an astronomical sum, suggesting someone believed it held tremendous value. But its origins remain murky. Carbon dating places its creation between 1404 and 1438, and the ink matches recipes from that era. Yet nothing about its content fits the period. Botanists have scoured its lush, otherworldly flora, finding no matches to real species. Some pages depict naked women bathing in interconnected green tubes, while others show zodiac symbols floating in unfamiliar constellations. Every attempt to read it crashes against the same wall. The text follows linguistic patterns with syntax and word repetition that imply real meaning, but no alphabet or cipher has ever made sense of it. Frustration has bred wild theories. Some claim it's a glossolalia, a stream of unconscious symbols penned by a mystic in a trance. Others argue it's an encoded scientific treatise, perhaps by Roger Bacon, hiding forbidden knowledge from the church. More fringe explanations venture into alien authorship or even time-traveling hoaxes. The most tantalizing clue came in 2019, when a scholar claimed to spot Hebrew words scrambled through an alphagram cipher, but the translation yielded only fragments, like a radio transmission cutting in and out. Even artificial intelligence has joined the hunt, analyzing letter frequencies and patterns, yet the manuscript resists, as if its true purpose is to remain just out of reach. What makes the Voynich Manuscript endure isn't just its defiance of translation, but the unsettling possibility that it's a deliberate puzzle. Medieval books were laborious to produce, each page a week's work. Why expend that effort on gibberish, unless, of course, it isn't gibberish at all? Perhaps it's a language so niche, so tied to a lost culture or secret society, that its key died with its creators. Or maybe it's something more profound, a testament to how much history still hides in plain sight, waiting for the right mind to finally listen. Until then, it remains the ultimate literary ghost, haunting the boundary between genius and madness. In the quiet desert town of Taos, New Mexico, there's a sound that doesn't belong. Since the early 1990s, residents have reported a relentless low-frequency hum, a deep, vibrating drone like a distant engine that never shuts off. It's just loud enough to be maddening, creeping into homes at night, disrupting sleep, and leaving scientists scratching their heads. Dubbed the Taos Hum, this phenomenon isn't just a local oddity. It's become one of the most enduring acoustic mysteries of the modern age, with no clear source ever identified. At first glance, it might seem like a case of mass hysteria. After all, only about 2% of Taos's population claims to hear the hum, leading skeptics to suggest it's a psychological quirk, a shared auditory illusion. But the consistency of the descriptions is unnerving. Those who hear it describe the same eerie tone, often comparing it to the rumble of a diesel truck idling outside, even when no vehicle is there. Some feel it more than hear it, a physical vibration that rattles windows or hums through their bones. Researchers have set up microphones and seismic sensors, scouring the area for industrial equipment, underground pipelines, or military activity. Yet every lead hits a dead end. The hum persists, but its origin remains invisible. Then there are the darker theories. Taos sits near sensitive government sites, including Los Alamos National Laboratory, fueling speculation about secret experiments or subterranean facilities emitting low-frequency waves. Could it be some kind of sonic weapon or communication technology? Others point to geological explanations like microseismic activity, tiny, constant shifts in the Earth's crust generating infrasound, frequencies too low for most humans to perceive. But why would only a fraction of people hear it? Some researchers suspect these individuals have a rare sensitivity to certain frequencies, turning them into unwilling receivers of a signal most of us ignore. The Taos Hum taps into a broader mystery. Phantom sounds reported worldwide, from Bristol in England to Largs in Scotland. These world hums share eerie similarities, yet defy universal explanation. One unsettling possibility: the hum isn't external at all. Tinnitus, a condition causing persistent ringing in the ears, can manifest as a low drone, but that doesn't account for the shared experience among unrelated people in the same area. Unless, of course, there's an environmental trigger that only affects certain ears. What makes the Taos Hum so haunting isn't just the noise itself, but the way it lingers at the edge of perception, dancing between science and folklore. It's a reminder that even in an age of satellites and sensors, some phenomena refuse to be pinned down. For those who hear it, the hum is inescapable, a soundtrack to their nights that science has yet to silence. And until someone proves otherwise, the question remains: is it out there in the desert or inside the minds of those who listen? Either way, the mystery echoes on. One frigid February morning in 1855, the people of Devon, England, woke to a sight that chilled them more than the snow itself. Overnight, something had left a trail of hoof prints, not ordinary prints, but perfect cloven marks, as if a massive goat had stalked through the countryside with single-minded purpose. The tracks stretched for over 100 miles, crossing rooftops, scaling walls, and even appearing to march straight through solid obstacles like haystacks and rivers. Villagers whispered of the devil himself taking a midnight stroll, while newspapers scrambled to make sense of what they called the devil's footprints. The sheer impossibility of the tracks defied logic. Each print measured exactly 4 inches long, spaced 8 inches apart in a flawless, unwavering line. No meandering, no pauses, just relentless forward motion. Witnesses reported the prints glowed faintly in places, as if touched by some infernal heat. Panic spread like wildfire. Churches held impromptu services, farmers barred their doors, and some families even fled the area, convinced evil had literally walked among them. But what could explain such a phenomenon? Scientists and skeptics rushed to offer theories. One natural explanation points to freak atmospheric conditions. a rare type of hoarfrost or ice expansion that might create raised, hoof-like shapes. Yet frost doesn't form in perfect, repeating patterns, and certainly not across such vast distances. Others suggested an escaped kangaroo from a private menagerie, its bipedal gait and long toes potentially matching the prints. But kangaroos don't walk in straight lines for miles without deviation, nor do they leap onto roofs or vanish without a trace, the most chilling detail. The prints vanished abruptly at the edge of a wood, as if whatever made them had simply dissolved into thin air. To this day, no definitive answer exists. Some argue it was a mass hallucination fueled by superstition, while cryptozoologists propose an unknown creature, perhaps a surviving relic of British folklore like the demonic black shuck. The devil's footprints remain a stark reminder that even in the age of industry and enlightenment, nature, or something beyond it, can still carve mysteries into the snow, leaving us to wonder what walked there long after the tracks have melted away. During the height of World War II, a story emerged that would blur the line between military secrecy and science fiction. According to legend, in October 1943, the U.S. Navy conducted a top-secret experiment aboard the USS Eldridge, a destroyer escort docked in Philadelphia. The goal: to render the ship invisible to enemy radar using powerful electromagnetic fields. But the results were said to be far more terrifying than anyone anticipated. Witnesses claimed the entire vessel vanished from the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, not just from radar screens but from sight entirely. Some accounts even described the ship teleporting to Norfolk, Virginia, over 200 miles away before reappearing moments later. More disturbing were the alleged side effects: sailors fused to bulkheads, others driven insane, and men who burst into flames in front of their crewmates. The story of the Philadelphia experiment first gained traction in 1955, when a mysterious figure named Carlos Allende, later revealed to be Carl Allen, sent rambling letters to astronomer Morris Jessup. Allen claimed to have witnessed the event firsthand, insisting the Navy had harnessed Einstein's unified field theory to bend light and space-time itself. But here's where things unravel. Naval records confirm the USS Eldridge wasn't even in Philadelphia on the alleged date. It was docked in New York. Crew members later came forward, baffled by the rumors, stating no such experiment ever occurred. Even Einstein's associates dismissed the idea, noting the physicist never worked on military invisibility projects. So why does the myth endure? Part of its staying power lies in the era's atmosphere of secrecy. The Manhattan Project had already proven the military was capable of unimaginable scientific leaps. Throw in verified experiments like radar-absorbing, stealth coatings for submarines, actual classified work that could have been misinterpreted, and the seeds for conspiracy take root. Pop culture amplified it further, from cheesy 1980s films to countless books exposing the truth. But perhaps the darkest clue to the legend's persistence lies in the very real horrors of wartime experimentation. The Navy did conduct tests on degaussing using magnetic fields to protect ships from mines, and some sailors were indeed exposed to high-voltage equipment, suffering burns and neurological damage. The Philadelphia experiment endures not because it happened, but because it could have. It merges our fear of unchecked military power with the tantalizing idea that science might unlock the impossible. And in that space between fact and folklore, the USS Eldridge sails on forever, vanishing into a story we can't resist retelling. In the freezing February of 1959, 9 experienced hikers ventured into the Ural Mountains, never to return alive. When search teams finally found their abandoned camp weeks later, the scene was a nightmare stitched with unanswered questions. The tent had been slashed open from the inside, as if the group had fled in a frenzy. Footprints led away into the snow, some barefoot, others clad in just socks, as though they'd run for their lives in sub-zero temperatures. One by one, their bodies were discovered scattered across the slope, some with horrific internal injuries, others missing eyes or tongues. This was the Dyatlov Pass Incident, a tragedy so bizarre it spawned decades of speculation, from Soviet conspiracies to forces beyond our understanding. What could make seasoned mountaineers tear through their only shelter in the dead of winter? The official explanation points to an avalanche, arguing the hikers might have cut their way out to escape being buried. But skeptics note the slope wasn't steep enough for a deadly slide, and the bodies were found too far uphill for that theory to hold. Some showed signs of blunt force trauma, broken ribs, skull fractures, as if they'd been struck with tremendous force. Stranger still, one victim's skull was entirely empty, her brain and tongue mysteriously absent, though scavengers couldn't explain the surgical precision of the injuries. Even the timeline defies logic. The group's last journal entries show no signs of panic, yet within hours they'd fled into the night without proper clothing, some succumbing to hypothermia mere steps from the tent. Alternative theories spiral into darker territory. Infrasound low-frequency noise inaudible to humans can induce panic and even physical pain at high intensities. Could natural wind patterns or military testing have generated waves that drove the hikers mad? Others point to the orange glow witnesses reported that night, suggesting a secret missile test gone wrong, with shockwaves or toxic gas explaining the injuries. Then there's the radiation detected on some clothing, fueling whispers of a KGB cover-up. But the most chilling possibility, indigenous Mansi tribesmen spoke of ancient spirits guarding the mountains, warning outsiders not to disturb the sacred peaks. The truth may never be unearthed. In 2020, Russian authorities reopened the case only to conclude once again that an avalanche was to blame. Yet the Dyatlov Pass refuses to surrender its secrets. For every answer, there's a counter. Why were some bodies found dressed in clothing cut from the dead, as if survivors had lingered long enough to perform grim triage? Why was the tent's interior layered with frost, hinting they'd spent hours inside before their final, frantic escape? The incident stands as a grim jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing, a reminder that nature, or something far older, can still turn a wilderness into a killing ground without leaving a clear culprit. Whatever happened that night, one thing's certain: those 9 hikers didn't just die. They were hunted by something they never saw coming. In 1818, a Tennessee farmer named John Bell made a chilling entry in his diary: "A spirit has begun speaking to us." What followed was one of America's most notorious hauntings. A years-long nightmare that would escalate from eerie whispers to physical violence, culminating in a death even skeptics struggle to explain. The bell, which wasn't just a ghost story, it was a phenomenon witnessed by generals, judges, and future President Andrew Jackson, who supposedly fled the farm after declaring, "I'd rather fight the British Army than deal with this witch." At first, the disturbances were subtle knocking on walls, sheets yanked from beds, the sound of rats gnawing between the walls. But soon, the entity gained a voice, introducing itself as Kate, a vengeful spirit with an encyclopedic knowledge of the Bell's lives. It recited Bible verses in reverse, mimicked the cries of dying animals, and hurled obscenities with the precision of a jilted lover. Most terrifying was its singular obsession: John Bell himself. Witnesses claimed the witch would pinch him until his skin bruised, force him to vomit mysterious black seeds, and whisper threats in his ear as he lay paralyzed in bed. Then came the night of December 1920, when John was found unconscious, his mouth stained with a vial of foul-smelling liquid. By morning, he was dead, the only documented case in U.S. history where a court reportedly ruled death by ghost. But was it really supernatural? Modern researchers point to the family's youngest daughter, Betsy, as a potential culprit. At 12 years old, she was often the witch's primary target, yet some accounts describe her seizures coinciding with the attacks, leading psychologists to suggest she might have been an unwitting poltergeist agent, her adolescent angst manifesting through involuntary psychokinesis. Others suspect a more calculated hoax, The Bell's neighbor, a schoolteacher named Richard Powell, had courted Betsy and stood to inherit Bell's land if his rival Betsy's father died. Could Powell have used ventriloquism and hidden wires to terrorize the family, poisoning John Bell when the ruse threatened to unravel? Even the witch's supposed deathbed confession, a song sung from the walls claiming responsibility, reeks of theatricality. Yet some details defy skepticism. Multiple witnesses, including the town doctor, swore they saw John Bell's lifeless body convulse when the witch laughed, as if tugged by invisible strings. The vial of poison found near his bed contained no known toxin, just a dark, acrid sludge no chemist could identify. And then there's the cave, a gaping maw in the earth near the Bell farm where the spirit allegedly retreated, a site still avoided by locals to this day. Whether mass hysteria, elaborate murder, or something beyond our understanding, the Bell Witch endures as a testament to fear's power to shape reality itself. Because when an entire community believes in a monster, does it matter if that monster was ever real? The summer of 1947 should have been just another quiet season in the Straits of Malacca, where the waters shimmer under the equatorial sun. But on June 27th, a Dutch freighter picked up a frantic distress call that would become one of maritime history's most chilling enigmas. The voice crackled through the static, barely human in its panic. All officers, including the captain, are dead. Lying in chartroom and bridge, possibly whole crew dead. Then, after a burst of Morse code, the final, whispered words, "I die." The signal cut out, but not before two other ships triangulated its source, the SS Orang Medan, a Dutch-flagged vessel supposedly hauling sulfuric acid from Indonesia to Costa Rica. What rescuers found when they boarded hours later defied every law of nature and logic. Every crew member was dead, not just deceased, frozen in expressions of sheer terror, eyes wide, mouths gaping as if their final screams had been silenced mid-air. Some clutched their throats, others pointed at unseen horrors. The radio operator still had his hands on the transmitter. The captain slumped in his chair, face twisted in agony. Even the ship's dog lay stiff in a snarl, teeth bared at nothing. Stranger still, no visible wounds, no signs of struggle, just a ship full of corpses, their limbs oddly rigid, as if struck down in unison by an invisible force. Within hours, the rescuers fled, but not before reporting an unnatural chill seeping through the metal corridors and a creeping sense of being watched. Then, as if the sea itself demanded silence, the Orang Medan suddenly caught fire and sank, taking its secrets to the depths before anyone could investigate further. Was it mass poisoning? The ship's alleged cargo, sulfuric acid, could leak toxic fumes, but that wouldn't explain the terror-stricken poses or the radio operator's cryptic final message. Others speculate about a rogue WW2 nerve gas canister, illegally transported and accidentally ruptured. Yet declassified military records show no such shipments in the region, and no known chemical weapon leaves victims with such theatrical, horror movie expressions. Then there's the darker theory: the Orang Medan never existed at all. No official registration papers have ever surfaced, and Dutch maritime archives contain no record of its construction. Skeptics argue the entire tale is a mashup of wartime ghost stories and tabloid sensationalism, first popularized in an American magazine in 1952. But here's where the mystery deepens. In 2016, a team of marine archaeologists claimed to find a wreck near Sumatra matching the Orang Medan's description, a steel-hulled freighter from the 1940s, its hull scarred by fire damage. Could this finally prove the ship was real, or is it just another shipwreck draped in legend by those who crave answers to an unsolvable riddle? The truth may lie somewhere between myth and tragedy, a cautionary tale about the dangers lurking in both the sea and human imagination. Because whether the Orang Medan was a victim of rogue science, criminal negligence, or something far stranger, its legacy endures as a warning. Some waters are best left uncharted, and some screams, even silent ones, never truly fade away. On the night of August 15, 1977, an astronomer at Ohio State University's Big Ear radio telescope glanced at a printout and saw something that made his blood run cold. Scrawled in red pen beside a string of data, he wrote a single word: "Wow." This wasn't just professional excitement, it was the shock of seeing a signal so precisely matching the hallmarks of an extraterrestrial transmission that, for 72 electrifying seconds, humanity might have heard another civilization calling from the void. The signal came from the constellation Sagittarius, blasting at a frequency of 1420 MHz, a radio-quiet zone where natural cosmic noise is minimal, making it the perfect channel for aliens to shout across the galaxy. What made the WOW signal extraordinary wasn't just its strength, but its structure. It hit with 30 times the intensity of background radiation, pulsed in a narrow band only 10 kHz wide, far too focused to be a quasar or pulsar, and followed the exact signature scientists predicted an intelligent transmission would. Even stranger, it displayed a frequency drift, subtly shifting as if originating from a rotating planet. The Big Ear telescope, designed to scan the sky in fixed intervals, caught only 72 seconds before the signal vanished. But in that fleeting window, it etched itself into history as the closest we've ever come to proof we're not alone. Decades of follow-up searches have yielded only silence. The SETI Institute has trained its arrays on Sagittarius repeatedly, hunting for a repeat broadcast. Astronomers have scoured the area for stars with potentially habitable planets, yet nothing matches the signal's supposed origin point. Skeptics argue it could have been a reflected human transmission, a satellite or military radar bouncing off space debris. But the frequency was banned for earthly use by international agreement, and no known technology at the time could have produced such a focused burst. Others suggest a comet's hydrogen cloud passing through the telescope's field of view, yet no comets were recorded in that region in 1977. The WOW signal's enduring power lies in its purity as a mystery. Unlike crop circles or blurry UFO footage, it's a concrete data point, untainted by hoaxes or hallucinations. It's the cosmic equivalent of picking up the phone to hear a voice say, "Hello," only to have the line go dead before you can respond. Whether it was a fleeting technical glitch, a once-in-a-century astrophysical fluke, or the desperate call of a civilization long gone, the signal remains a whisper from the dark, daring us to keep listening. And perhaps that's the point. Maybe the universe isn't hiding its secrets, it's just waiting for us to finally understand the question. Elizabeth Short's smile was the last thing Los Angeles ever saw of her alive. By the time her body was discovered in a vacant lot on January 15, 1947, bisected at the waist and drained of blood, that smile had become a grotesque rictus, the centerpiece of a crime scene so savage even seasoned detectives recoiled. The press dubbed her the Black Dahlia, a name pulled from a noir film, and though her murder remains unsolved, the real horror may lie in what happened next. Because those who chased the truth, the journalists, the cops, the obsessed amateurs, began dying under circumstances so strange, whispers of a curse took root. Take reporter Will Fowler, one of the first at the scene. His career unraveled after covering the case, culminating in a mental breakdown and a stint in psychiatric care. Then there's Ralph Asdell, the officer who found Elizabeth's body. He survived a near-fatal car crash months later, only to spend decades tormented by visions of her mutilated corpse. Even crime writer John Gilmore, who penned a definitive account of the case, claimed an unseen force stalked him during his research, hurling objects across his study. But the most chilling death belongs to Dr. Walter Bailey, a surgeon briefly suspected due to his anatomical precision. The same man who dropped dead of a sudden brain hemorrhage exactly 2 years after Elizabeth's murder, in the same hospital where her autopsy was performed. Coincidence or something colder? Hollywood, of course, couldn't resist. Films like True Confessions and The Black Dahlia spun the tragedy into lurid fiction, muddying facts with sensationalism. The real Elizabeth, a 22-year-old waitress who dreamed of stardom, vanished beneath the myth. Yet the cursed narrative persists, fueled by a darker truth. The case itself became a vortex, sucking in anyone who got too close. Suspects like George Hodel, a physician whose own son later accused him based on eerie tape recordings, died under clouds of suspicion. Evidence vanished from police archives. Key witnesses recanted or disappeared. Even the infamous red lipstick letter, supposedly sent by the killer, was lost for decades before resurfacing under disputed circumstances. So where does the supernatural end and human darkness begin? Perhaps the answer lies in the nature of obsession itself. The Black Dahlia wasn't just a murder, it was a mirror reflecting the ugliest facets of post-war America: voyeurism, misogyny, the commodification of violence. Those who fixated on the case weren't cursed by a ghost, they were consumed by the horror of the unsolvable, the knowledge that evil could walk away scot-free. And in that sense, the curse is real. It's the weight of a question mark that will never lift, the echo of a scream frozen in time. Elizabeth Short may rest in peace, but her story, that's a wound that never closes. The first sighting came on a cold November evening in 1966, when two young couples driving near Point Pleasant, West Virginia, saw something impossible. A towering figure with glowing red eyes and massive wings folded against its back, standing nearly 7 feet tall in the headlights. When it spread those wings and took flight, they swore it moved faster than any bird, keeping pace with their car at nearly 100 miles an hour. This was the birth of the Mothman legend, a harbinger of doom that would haunt the Ohio River Valley for 13 months before vanishing as mysteriously as it appeared. Just hours before the Silver Bridge collapsed into icy waters, taking 46 souls with it. Eyewitnesses described the creature with eerie consistency: leathery wings spanning 10 feet, a humanoid shape shrouded in shadow, and those piercing crimson eyes that seemed to hypnotize anyone who met its gaze. But the Mothman wasn't just a regional bogeyman. Reports poured in of UFOs darting over the area, men in black intimidating locals into silence, and even premonitions of the bridge's collapse. One woman claimed the creature visited her in a dream, whispering coordinates that later matched the disaster site. Another witness, a young mother, swore she saw it perched on her roof days before the tragedy, staring at her infant's window with what she called the saddest eyes. Skeptics dismiss the phenomenon as misidentified sandhill cranes or mass hysteria fueled by Cold War anxiety. After all, Point Pleasant housed a top-secret WW2 munitions plant, and some theorize experimental chemicals or military flares could explain the glowing eyes. But that doesn't account for the strangest detail. Multiple witnesses reported electronics failing in the Mothman's presence. Car engines stalling, radios screeching static, even power outages rippling through neighborhoods where it was sighted. The ultimate question isn't just what people saw, but why it seemed tied to catastrophe. Across cultures, winged omens, from the Irish banshee to the Slavic alkonost, are said to herald death. Was the Mothman a supernatural warning, a glitch in reality, or a collective hallucination born of fear? The bridge's collapse, caused by a single faulty eyebar, feels almost mundane compared to the theatrics preceding it. Yet to this day, Mothman sightings spike before disasters, from Chernobyl to 9/11, as if whatever visited Point Pleasant never really left, just found new bridges to watch. It started with footprints in the snow-fresh tracks leading up to the farmhouse, but none going back. Then came the noises, footsteps in the attic when no one was up there, a strange newspaper left on the kitchen table, even the missing house key turning up in an impossible spot. For days before the slaughter, the Gruber family knew something was wrong at Hinterkaifeck, their remote Bavarian farmstead. By the time neighbors finally investigated the silence in March 1922, they found a scene so gruesome even veteran detectives were shaken. 6 bodies, 2 adults, 2 children, their maid, and the new maid who'd arrived just hours earlier lay battered to death with a pickaxe. But the most chilling detail: Evidence suggests the killer stayed for days afterward, feeding the livestock, eating from the pantry, even covering the bodies with hay as if tucking them in for bed. The murders defy logic on every level. Forensics showed the family was lured one by one into the barn, suggesting they knew their killer, yet no valuables were taken, ruling out robbery. Some believe it was a crime of vengeance. The patriarch, Andreas Gruber, had a reputation for cruelty, and whispers of incest swirled around the family. But how does that explain the eerie premonitions? Days before the attack, the previous maid quit, claiming the farm was haunted. The new replacement, hired sight unseen, arrived the day of the murders. Her body was found beside the others, suggesting the killer may have impersonated her to gain entry. Neighbors later recalled hearing the children's voices after their estimated time of death, as if the farm itself were replaying its final moments. Then there's the paranormal angle. Witnesses reported seeing a shadowy figure watching the farm weeks before the massacre. The Gruber's young daughter, Kazilia, told classmates a man hides in the attic days before her murder. Even the farm's location fed the legend. Hinterkaifeck translates to behind the bent pine, a tree long considered a bad omen in local folklore. Skeptics point to a more earthly suspect, Lawrence Schlittenbauer, a neighbor with a grudge and an airtight alibi. Yet no evidence ever tied him to the scene, and the case was closed abruptly in 1955, sparking rumors of a cover-up to protect someone powerful. What makes Hinterkaifeck endure isn't just the brutality, but the intimacy of the horror. This wasn't a random attack, it was a surgical strike by someone who knew the family's routines, their fears, even where they hid their spare key. Whether human or something more spectral, the killer left behind a riddle wrapped in a nightmare. 6 lives erased, a farm abandoned to the elements, and the unshakable sense that for those few days in March, evil didn't just visit Hinterkaifeck. It moved in. On a desolate hillside near Rio de Janeiro in August 1966, 2 men in identical black suits lay side by side, their faces obscured by strange lead masks. Nearby, an empty water bottle and a cryptic note offered the only clues. Protection gear requested at 4:30. Wait for the agreed signal. This was the lead mask's case, a death scene so bizarre it's been dissected for decades. Was it a tragic UFO ritual, a botched science experiment, or something far darker? The victims, electronics technician Manuel Pereira da Cruz and factory worker Miguel José Viana, weren't strangers to the unexplained. Friends described them as obsessed with the occult, dabbling in seances and claiming contact with extraterrestrials. Their final moments followed an eerie routine. They bought the masks from a local shop, telling the clerk they were for protection against radiation. Witnesses last saw them boarding a bus toward the isolated Morro do Vintém, a spot rumored to be a UFO hotspot. Autopsies revealed no trauma or poison, just 2 healthy men who seemed to have simply laid down and died. The lead masks fuel the wildest theories. UFO enthusiasts argue they were makeshift shielding for close encounters, citing Brazilian lore about alien batteries emitting harmful energy. The note's mention of a signal hints at an arranged meeting, perhaps with beings who never arrived. Others point to the men's interest in fringe science. Lead can block certain frequencies, suggesting they might have been testing homemade equipment. But skeptics note the masks were crudely made, more costume than technology. Then there's the murder angle. One victim's family insisted Miguel feared for his life before his death, hinting at threats from a secretive group. The water bottle, laced with traces of an unknown substance, raises questions of coercion. Could the men have been forced into suicide as part of a cult initiation gone wrong? Even the note's odd phrasing, protection gear requested, reads less like a mystical chant and more like staged instructions, as if someone wanted the scene to look supernatural. Yet the truth may lie in the gaps. No cult ever claimed responsibility. No UFO sightings were reported that night. the case was quietly shelved, leaving behind only photographs of those eerie masks staring skyward, as if waiting for an answer that never came. Whether the work of human hands or forces beyond our understanding, the lead masks case remains a Rorschach test, a blank space where we see our own fears reflected back. And sometimes the most unsettling mysteries aren't about what happened, but why we keep trying to solve them. On Christmas Eve 1945, while most families in Fayetteville, West Virginia, were settling into holiday warmth, George and Jenny Sodder woke to smoke and screams. Their house was burning fast, not the slow creep of an accidental fire, but a savage inferno that consumed the wooden structure in minutes. The parents and 4 of their children escaped, but 5 others, Morris, Martha, Louie, Jenny, and Betty, were nowhere to be found. By morning, only ashes and twisted metal remained. No screams had been heard from the children's upstairs bedroom. No bones were found in the rubble. The Sodders would spend the rest of their lives convinced their kids hadn't died that night, but had been taken. From the start, nothing added up. Witnesses reported seeing strange men loitering near the house days before the fire. One even claimed to have seen a man toss a ball of fire onto the roof. The Sodders' phone line was mysteriously cut that night, and their truck, usually reliable, wouldn't start, forcing George to sprint for help on foot. Even the fire itself behaved unnaturally. Neighbors swore the flames burned too hot and fast for a wood frame house, suggesting an accelerant like gasoline. Yet when the county sheriff sifted through the debris, he declared the fire accidental, blaming faulty wiring despite the Sodders insisting their electrical system had been recently inspected. Then came the most haunting detail, the lack of remains. Even in intense fires, teeth and bone fragments typically survive, but after multiple searches, not a single trace of the children was found. A local funeral director later admitted the ashes seemed too sparse, as if someone had removed evidence before the official investigation. The family's own digging turned up more questions. A neighbor found a strange, gelatinous substance in the rubble that melted when touched, possibly a chemical residue. And when the Sodders hired a private detective, he vanished mid-case, later turning up dead under suspicious circumstances. For years afterward, reported sightings trickled in. A bus driver claimed to have seen the children with 2 dark-haired women the morning after the fire, looking dazed. A photo mailed to the family in 1968 showed a man resembling their son Louis as an adult, but the lead went cold. Jenny Sodder spent decades plastering missing person posters across the country, even offering a reward for answers. Some theorized the family was targeted by the Italian mafia. George, an outspoken critic of Mussolini, had received threats. Others whispered about a botched kidnapping with the children sold into illegal adoption rings. The Sodder case is more than a mystery. It's a collision of parental intuition and systemic failure. How could 5 children dissolve into thin air? Why were official reports so dismissive of glaring red flags? And what does it say about justice when a family's cries for truth are met with shrugged shoulders and closed files? The house is long gone, the parents passed without answers, but the question lingers like smoke in the wind. If the fire didn't take those children, what did? It was supposed to be just another night of television in Chicago, until the screens glitched, the signal wavered, and suddenly, viewers weren't watching Doctor Who anymore. Instead, a figure in a distorted Max Headroom mask filled their living rooms, his electronically garbled voice chanting, "Your love is fading." For 26 surreal seconds on November 22, 1987, someone hijacked the airwaves of WGN and WTTW, thrusting one of broadcast history's strangest unsolved mysteries into living rooms across the city. The intrusion was audacious in its precision. First, WTTW PBS feed was interrupted during an episode of Doctor Who, a show already beloved by tech-savvy fans. The masked figure rambled incoherently, his face obscured by plastic sunglasses, his movements jerky and unnatural. He waved a Pepsi can, mocked corporate slogans, and at one point bent over as another person spanked him with a fly swatter. Then, 90 minutes later, WGN's signal was hijacked mid-sportscast, replaying the same bizarre footage before cutting back to a stunned news anchor. The timing wasn't random. Both stations shared the same transmission tower, suggesting the hacker knew exactly how to exploit their vulnerabilities. So who was behind the mask? Theories range from rogue TV engineers to underground hacker collectives. The intruder's outfit, a rubber max headroom mask paired with a glitched voice filter, points to someone steeped in 80s cyberculture. Max Headroom himself was a corporate-made icon, a digital AI parody used to sell everything from Coke to computers. By twisting this mascot into something unsettling, the hacker might have been mocking media itself, turning the airwaves into his own twisted art project. Others suspect an inside job. Former employees of Chicago's broadcast stations have whispered about disgruntled technicians with the skills to override transmitters, though no one's ever stepped forward. The most haunting detail: authorities never caught the culprit. The FCC launched an investigation, tracing the signal to a rooftop near the Sears Tower, but the trail went cold. Some believe the hijacker used a portable setup, a modified van, or even a backpack transmitter, making him impossible to track. Others think law enforcement simply didn't prioritize what they saw as a prank. But in an age before digital security, the intrusion exposed a terrifying truth. The airwaves were wide open, and anyone with enough know-how could hijack them. What makes the Max Headroom incident endure isn't just its strangeness, but its cultural footprint. It foreshadowed today's digital paranoia, the fear that our screens could be commandeered at any moment. Modern broadcast piracy is nearly impossible thanks to encryption, but in 1987, the line between viewer and broadcaster was thinner than we realized. The masked intruder didn't just disrupt television that night. He proved that even the most controlled systems have cracks, and sometimes through those cracks, something inexplicable slips in. Whether he was a genius, a troll, or something in between, one thing's certain: for 26 seconds he owned the airwaves, and then, like a ghost in the machine, he was gone. The Flannan Isles lighthouse stood empty on December 26, 1900, its beam dark despite clear skies, a silent alarm no one noticed right away. When supply ship Hesperus finally reached the island 3 days later, relief turned to dread. No one greeted them. The main gate was locked. Inside, the clock had stopped, the fire lay cold, and the keeper's coat still hung neatly by the door, as if Thomas Marshall, James Jucat, and Donald MacArthur had simply stepped out for a breath of air and never returned. The last log entry offered eerie clues. Marshall noted severe winds despite calm weather that week, then scribbled, "Storm ended, sea calm, God is over all." After that, only silence. What happened to the three men has sparked debates for over a century. The official inquiry blamed a freak wave, theorizing they'd been swept off the Western Rail while repairing storm damage. Yet the evidence was contradictory. The logbook mentioned winds from the wrong direction for that time of year. A set of overturned chairs inside suggested a struggle, not an orderly evacuation. Most baffling, the lighthouse stood 200 feet above sea level. Waves that high would have been unprecedented. Skeptics argue the men staged their own disappearance, perhaps fleeing debts or troubled past. But why leave behind personal items like MacArthur's prized tobacco pouch, still tucked in his drawer? Then come the darker legends. Locals spoke of ancient tales warning sailors away from the Flannans, calling it the Green Island of the Dead. Some whispered of a monstrous sea creature glimpsed in the waters below, a beast with eyes like lanterns and a roar that could still storms. Others pointed to the lighthouse's construction, built atop ruins said to be older than recorded history, its stones aligned with Neolithic standing stones nearby. Could the keepers have disturbed something buried deep beneath the foundation? Even the log's final phrase, "God is over all," reads less like a weather report and more like a plea or a warning. Modern researchers offer a middle ground. The Flannan Isles sit atop a geological fault line where methane gas could seep from fissures, causing hallucinations or even explosions. Perhaps the keepers saw visions, a storm that wasn't there, a sound only they could hear and fled in panic, or maybe the truth lies in the isolation itself. Lighthouses of that era were psychological pressure cookers, with men confined for months in deafening silence and crushing loneliness. Some cracked under the strain, walking into the sea as if summoned. The Flannan mystery endures because it's a riddle with no wrong answers, only gaps we fill with our own fears. Whether swallowed by the sea, lured by something older than time, or simply victims of human error, the keepers vanished into the same fog they were meant to pierce. Their light still burns today, a beacon against the dark, but some shadows, it seems, even light can't chase away. On a seemingly ordinary August morning in 1994, the residents of Oakville, Washington, stepped outside to find their town coated in something out of a horror movie. Tiny gelatinous blobs, clear, pea-sized and slightly sticky, rained from the sky, clinging to cars, rooftops and skin. At first, it seemed like a bizarre but harmless weather quirk. Until people started getting sick. Headaches, dizziness, blurred vision, and violent coughing fits spread through the community within hours, with dozens rushed to the hospital. Tests revealed the blobs weren't just odd precipitation, they contained human white blood cells, and no one to this day can fully explain how they got there. Theories range from the unsettling to the outright otherworldly. One prevailing suspicion points to military experimentation. Oakville sits near naval bases and flight paths, and rumors swirled about secret biological weapons tests gone awry. Some claim the blobs match descriptions of synthetic compounds designed to disrupt respiratory systems, a chilling thought given the symptoms. Yet no government agency ever claimed responsibility, and official samples sent to labs mysteriously vanished or were deemed inconclusive. Then there's the slime mold angle. Certain species, like Fuligo septica, can form gelatinous masses under rare conditions, but slime molds don't rain from the sky in concentrated bursts, nor do they contain human cellular material. That leaves the extraterrestrial hypothesis. UFO sightings spiked in the region that summer, and some researchers suggest the blobs could have been atmospheric eggs from an unknown organism, a concept straight out of sci-fi. Even more unnerving, similar incidents have occurred globally. In 2001, a red jelly fell in India, later found to contain fungal spores not native to Earth. And in the 1950s, Scotland's star jelly baffled scientists with its rapid disintegration and eerie luminescence. These parallels make Oakville less of an isolated oddity and more like a single thread in a much weirder tapestry. The most haunting detail, though, isn't the blobs themselves, it's the aftermath. Residents reported lingering health issues for years, from chronic fatigue to neurological damage. Pets exposed to the substance died within days, yet without conclusive evidence, the event faded into obscurity, dismissed as atmospheric pollution by officials. But try telling that to the people who watched their town become a real-life X-Files episode. Because when the sky itself turns against you, leaving behind traces of something that shouldn't exist, case closed doesn't feel like justice. It feels like a warning. June and Jennifer Gibbons were born in Wales in 1963, identical twins who lived in a world of their own making, one that baffled doctors, terrified their family, and spiraled into one of the most unsettling cases of psychic entanglement ever recorded. From childhood, they spoke only to each other, communicating in a rapid-fire dialect no one else could understand. To outsiders, their silence was impenetrable. But behind closed doors, they built elaborate fantasy kingdoms, wrote voluminous diaries, and authored dark, prophetic novels that seemed to blur the line between fiction and their own twisted reality. Their bond wasn't just closeness, it was a kind of psychic captivity, a private universe where only they existed. and when that bond finally broke, it did so in the most chilling way imaginable. The twins' isolation began early. Bullied for their Caribbean heritage in predominantly white Haverford-West, they withdrew completely, speaking just a handful of words to others, mostly clipped, monotone responses. But between themselves, a torrent of shared language, whispered jokes, and eerie synchronicity. They moved in perfect unison, finished each other's thoughts, and even seemed to feel each other's physical pain. Psychiatrists diagnosed them with selective mutism, but that label felt too small. This wasn't just refusal to speak, it was the total rejection of a world they deemed unworthy of their voices. Their diaries reveal a haunting self-awareness. "We are locked away," Jennifer wrote, "because no one deserves us." Then came the writing. In their teens, they produced dozens of manuscripts, dark, violent tales of trapped souls and doomed lovers, often mirroring their own lives. One story featured twin sisters who made a pact. If one died, the other must speak and live normally. It read less like fiction and more like a blueprint. Their behavior grew more erratic. Arson, petty theft, a bizarre incident where they boarded a train to London and sat motionless for hours before being returned home. Authorities eventually committed them to Broadmoor, England's most notorious psychiatric hospital, where they spent 14 years in near-total isolation. And that's when Jennifer made her prophecy. One afternoon, she turned to June and calmly announced, "I'm going to die soon, and when I do, you have to speak." 12 hours later, Jennifer was dead. The coroner found no clear cause, no poison, no trauma, just a healthy 30-year-old whose heart had simply stopped. True to their childhood story, June emerged from her silence immediately, giving interviews and even appearing on television. But her newfound voice came at a cost. "It's like she took something from me when she left," June confessed later. "Not just my twin, but the part of me that knew how to live without words." Was this a case of extreme psychological symbiosis, where two minds became so entangled that separation meant death? Or something stranger? Twin telepathy is a well-documented phenomenon, with countless accounts of siblings sensing each other's distress across miles. But the Gibbons twins took it further. Their bond bordered on supernatural, as if they shared not just thoughts but a single life force. Some researchers point to folie à deux, a rare shared delusion, but that doesn't explain the eerie accuracy of Jennifer's death prediction. Others whisper about psychic vampirism, one twin drawing energy from the other until the balance collapsed. The truth may lie in the diaries. Pages upon pages detail their pact, a vow that one must die for the other to be free. Jennifer's final entry, written hours before her death, reads, "The choice was made long ago. We just didn't know it yet." June lived another 29 years, a quiet, solitary figure who never fully adjusted to a world where her reflection no longer answered back. Their story isn't just about silence, it's about the terrifying power of a bond so deep it defies the boundaries of life itself. And perhaps that's the most unsettling question of all. When two souls become one, what happens when only half remains? The first one appeared in Philadelphia sometime in the early 1980s. A strange rectangular tile embedded in the asphalt, its letters carved deep into linoleum, then sealed with tar. The message was brief but bizarre. Toynbee idea in movie 2001, resurrect dead on planet Jupiter. At first glance, it seemed like nonsense. But then another appeared, and another. Over the next 3 decades, these cryptic tiles would surface in major cities across the Americas. New York, Baltimore, even as far south as Santiago, Chile. Each one repeating the same enigmatic phrase with eerie precision. Who was laying these tiles under cover of darkness, and what on earth, or perhaps beyond it, were they trying to tell us? The mystery only deepened when researchers traced the Toynbee reference to British historian Arnold Toynbee, whose writings speculated about humanity's spiritual evolution across civilizations. But the rest, Stanley Kubrick's 2001, A Space Odyssey, featured themes of rebirth and extraterrestrial intelligence, while Jupiter's prominence in the film, particularly the monolith orbiting the gas giant, hinted at something more. Some believe the tiles are an elaborate art project, an attempt to create an urban legend in real time. Others see darker undercurrents, references to fringe theories about Jupiter being a dead star capable of reanimating souls, or coded messages from occult groups obsessed with cosmic resurrection. Then came the variations. In the late 90s, new tiles began appearing with expanded messages rambling, paranoid screeds about media conspiracies, shadow governments, and even references to corpse raking on Jupiter. These were often signed the Society of the Mind, deepening the intrigue. But the real break came in 2013, when a documentary team claimed to unmask the likely creator, a reclusive Philadelphia resident named James Morasco, a former TV repairman with a fascination for Toynbee and space colonization. Morasco's widow confirmed he'd worked with linoleum and tar, and neighbors recalled him sneaking out at night with mysterious bundles, yet even this revelation left gaps. How did the tiles spread so far beyond Philadelphia after Morasco's death in 2003? And why would a seemingly ordinary man devote his life to embedding cryptic messages in city streets? The most compelling theory ties the tiles to a 20th century cultural undercurrent, the rise of esoteric mail art, where creators disseminated cryptic works through public spaces, challenging viewers to decode hidden meanings. The Toynbee tiles fit this mold perfectly, blending historical references, sci-fi mythology, and anarchic street art into something that defies simple explanation. But for those who have peeled back the layers, the tiles aren't just puzzles, they're mirrors. They reflect our hunger for hidden truths, our willingness to see patterns where none may exist, and our fascination with the idea that someone, somewhere, might be trying to tell us something we're not ready to hear. Whether art, obsession, or something far stranger, the Toynbee tiles endure because they tap into the oldest human question of all. Are we alone in the universe, or is something or someone trying to get our attention? One evening in November 1930, fur trapper Joe Labelle hiked into the remote Inuit village of Anjikuni, nestled along the frozen banks of Canada's Kazan River. What he found sent a chill through him that no Arctic wind could match. The settlement stood silent, fires still smoldered under pots of half-cooked stew, rifles leaned against tents, and sled dogs lay starved and tethered to posts. But of the village's roughly 30 inhabitants, there was no trace. Not a single footprint led away through the snow, no signs of struggle, just an entire community that had seemingly dissolved into thin air. Labelle's account, later popularized in a 1931 article, reads like something from a horror novel. He claimed to have spotted an eerie glow over the village before discovering the abandonment, and ominously noted that the graves in the burial ground had been emptied, their contents removed with precision. The story spread like wildfire, fueled by speculation of alien abductions, supernatural forces, or even secret government experiments. But when investigators finally reached Anjikuni months later, they found no graves disturbed, just an ordinary, albeit deserted, winter camp. So where does the truth lie? Skeptics point to a simpler explanation: seasonal migration. Inuit groups often relocated for hunting or trading, sometimes leaving behind heavy items to retrieve later. Their half-cooked meals might have been unattended pots left to simmer during a sudden departure, perhaps spurred by a passing caribou herd or urgent news from neighboring tribes. Even the starved dogs fit this theory. If the villagers expected to return soon, they might not have untied them. As for Labelle's embellishments, tabloid journalism of the era thrived on sensationalism, and the trapper's tale grew taller with each retelling. But the vanishing has deeper wrinkles. Local Inuit oral history mentions no such abrupt disappearance, and later researchers found no record of a village named Anjikuni existing at that location. Some argue Labelle simply stumbled upon a temporary hunting camp, its occupants long gone by the time outsiders arrived. Others suggest the entire story was a fabrication, stitched together from half-remembered anecdotes and the era's fascination with mysterious Eskimo legends. Yet even the most hardened debunkers can't entirely dismiss the unsettling aura of the case. Why would Les Bell invent such a detailed account? And if the villagers did leave willingly, why abandon critical supplies like rifles in a place where survival hinged on every resource? The Anjakuni mystery endures not because it defies all logic, but because it lives in the shadows between fact and folklore. It's a reminder of how easily isolation breeds myth, and how the vast, untamed wilderness of the Arctic can still conjure stories that resist explanation. Whether a case of misunderstood tradition, a hoax lost to time, or something far stranger, one thing's certain: when the wind howls over the empty shores of the Kazan River, it carries more than just the cold. It carries a question that may never be answered. The Pritchard family moved into their modest council house on East Drive in 1966, expecting nothing more sinister than creaky floorboards and the occasional draft. What they got was something far darker, a presence so malevolent it would become known as the Black Monk of Pontefract. It started with harmless oddities, objects misplaced, muffled whispers in empty rooms. But within weeks, the activity escalated into something no one could ignore. Young Philip Pritchard bore the brunt of it, being dragged up the stairs by his neck by an unseen force, his terrified screams echoing through the house. His mother, Jean, watched in horror as a heavy cross swung violently from the wall and struck her 14-year-old daughter, Diane, leaving her unconscious. And then there were the smells: sickly sweet lavender one moment, the choking stench of rotten meat the next. Unlike typical ghost stories, the Pontefract haunting left behind something rare: physical evidence. Police officers called to the scene witnessed chairs sliding across the floor unaided. A local journalist captured photographs of levitating objects, while neighbors reported seeing a shadowy figure in a hooded robe lurking near the property. The family's vicar even attempted an exorcism, only to be hurled down the stairs by an invisible hand. The entity's signature, a viscous black liquid that oozed from walls and pooled on floors, defying all attempts at cleanup. Modern paranormal investigators still flock to the house, drawn by its reputation as Britain's most violent poltergeist case. Yet today's findings only deepen the mystery. Thermal cameras pick up inexplicable cold spots exactly where the family reported the worst attacks. Electronic voice phenomena recordings capture guttural growls in response to direct questions, some even referencing the name Fred, the family's nickname for the entity. Some researchers link the activity to the house's grim past, built on land where medieval monks were executed during Henry VIII's dissolution of the monasteries. Others believe the monk isn't a ghost at all, but a tulpa, a thought form made real by generations of fear, feeding on the energy of those who dare to acknowledge it. What makes the Black Monk endure isn't just the brutality of the documented attacks, but the unnerving consistency across decades. The same phenomena reported by the Pritchards, the dragging, the odors, the liquid, still manifest for investigators today, as if whatever walks East Drive refuses to stay in the past. Whether a vengeful spirit, a psychic imprint, or something far older, one truth remains: some houses don't just hold history, they hold a grudge. On a drizzly November afternoon in 1970, hikers in Norway's Isdalen Valley stumbled upon a scene straight out of a spy thriller: a woman's body, charred beyond recognition, lying among the rocks. But this was no accident. The forensic details turned the case into an international enigma. Her fingerprints had been chemically erased, the tags cut from her clothing. Nearby, investigators found a suitcase stuffed with wigs, coded notebooks, and multiple passports, each bearing a different alias. This was the Isdal woman, a mystery that would weave together Cold War intrigue, occult whispers, and an identity so thoroughly scrubbed from existence, it's as if she never lived at all. The autopsy revealed even stranger clues. She'd ingested a lethal cocktail of sleeping pills and gasoline before the fire, a clear suicide, yet the burns showed signs of accelerant poured over her body after death. Who stages a suicide only to burn the evidence? Her dental work pointed to Eastern European origins, while traces of platinum blonde hair dye and high-end cosmetics suggested a woman accustomed to blending in. The coded journals found in her belongings contained cryptic notations, dates, cities, and sums of money that matched known espionage routes. Oslo police consulted cryptographers, even the Norwegian intelligence service, but the pages remained unreadable. Then came the whispers of Operation Gladio, an alleged NATO stay-behind network during the Cold War, training agents across Europe for covert operations. Was the Isdal woman a discarded asset, eliminated after a botched mission? Her movements traced a shadowy path, hotel registries under false names in Rome, Brussels, and Paris, always paying in cash, never leaving a paper trail. Yet skeptics note the theatrics, the erased fingerprints. The dramatic staging seem almost too perfect, as if designed to scream spy rather than conceal. But there's a darker thread. The Isdalen Valley, nicknamed Death Valley for its stark beauty, holds a grim reputation in local folklore. Some point to the woman's odd, crossed arms in death, a medieval ward against evil spirits. Others note the gasoline symbolism in occult rituals, used to purify or destroy traces of the supernatural. Could she have been involved in something far older than geopolitics? A cult defector, a target of something that didn't want her secrets leaving the valley. The truth may lie in the gaps. In 2016, forensic artists reconstructed her face, hoping someone might recognize her. No one did. Isotope analysis of her teeth narrowed her childhood to France or Germany, but records turned up no matches. Even the most meticulous spy wouldn't vanish this completely unless powerful forces wanted her gone. Or perhaps she wasn't a spy at all, just a woman fleeing something worse who chose fire over being found. The Isdal woman's greatest trick wasn't erasing her past. It was leaving us forever wondering which story is the real one and which is the carefully planted lie. Between 1968 and 1969, a killer terrorized Northern California, leaving behind not just bodies but riddles etched in blood. The Zodiac's first cipher arrived with a taunt tucked inside a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle. "Dear editor, this is the murderer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas." Below the message sat a grid of symbols, a jumble of crosses, slashes, and Greek letters that would consume cryptologists for decades. For years, 3 of the 4 known ciphers resisted all attempts at cracking, becoming the ultimate cold case for amateur sleuths and the FBI alike. Then, in 2020, a team of private analysts finally broke the infamous 340 cipher. The solution was chillingly mundane, a narcissistic rant about collecting slaves for the afterlife. But here's where things twist. The very act of solving it only deepened the mystery, because the remaining 2 ciphers, they're still uncracked, and some believe they weren't meant for human eyes at all. The deciphered messages reveal a killer obsessed with control, but also with spectacle. He didn't just want to murder, he wanted to perform. Each cipher was a stage, each solved letter a round of applause. Yet the unsolved Z32 cipher, just 32 characters long, mocks investigators with its brevity. It's too short for frequency analysis, too precise to be random. Some researchers think it's a red herring designed to waste time. Others point to its structure, a repeating pattern of symbols that aligns eerily with medieval demonic sigils, particularly those linked to the Gothic demon Bua, an entity said to grant invisibility and knowledge of herbs. Could the Zodiac have dabbled in the occult, embedding invocations within his puzzles? The theory gains traction when you examine his correspondence references to Paradis, spelled with a deliberate C, a possible nod to Paradise Lost and its themes of fallen angels. Then there's the 252 cipher, the holy grail of Zodiac lore. In 1970, the killer claimed it contained his identity. decades later it remains a fortress of silence. Cryptographers have thrown everything at it: supercomputers, AI, even crowd-sourced brainpower. Nothing works, but the most unnerving hypothesis comes from an unlikely source: physicists. In 2018, a paper noted that the cipher's symbol distribution mirrors the atomic numbers of elemental metals used in superconductors. Could it be a scientific cipher meant for someone or something with knowledge beyond our own? Wild as it sounds, it aligns with the Zodiac's own words. "My name is," he wrote, followed by a string of symbols some interpret as coordinates not to a location but to a frequency. What makes these ciphers endure isn't just the hunt for answers. It's the unsettling possibility that even if solved, they might reveal something we're not equipped to understand. The Zodiac didn't just play games with law enforcement. He played with the very idea of communication, leaving behind messages that feel less like clues and more like artifacts from a darker dimension. Whether the work of a twisted genius, a cultist, or something even harder to define, one thing's certain: somewhere in those unsolved grids of ink, the killer is still laughing. And the punchline might be worse than we ever imagined. One sunny afternoon in March 1974, the Betts family was surveying storm damage on their Florida property when they stumbled upon something that defied all logic: a polished metal sphere, roughly the size of a bowling ball, resting in the underbrush as if placed there by unseen hands. At first, they assumed it was a relic from a nearby military test range or even a piece of space debris. But when 21-year-old Terry Betts picked it up, the sphere did something impossible. It began to move on its own. The family described it as almost sentient. When rolled across the floor, the sphere would stop abruptly, change direction, or even return to the person who rolled it like a loyal pet. It emitted strange harmonic vibrations, as if humming to itself, and seemed to react to sunlight by rolling toward windows. Most unsettling, it occasionally pulsed with a rhythmic thumping like a mechanical heartbeat. The Bettses were convinced they'd found something not of this world, an artifact so advanced it bordered on alive. News of the Betts sphere exploded into a media frenzy, drawing the attention of scientists, military officials, and UFO researchers. NASA took possession of the object, subjecting it to X-rays and metallurgical tests. The results were baffling. The sphere was made of stainless steel, yet its interior contained a dense, unidentified material that scattered radiation in unusual patterns. Engineers noted its flawless symmetry: no seams, no welding marks, a perfect sphere down to microscopic tolerances. But here's the twist: NASA's final report declared it inconclusive, neither confirming nor denying its otherworldly origins. Some speculated it was a failed Soviet satellite component, though no records matched its design. Others whispered about Nazi experiments with gyroscopic technology, lost after World War II. Skeptics offered mundane explanations. One theory posited it was an industrial ball valve from high-pressure machinery, though no known models matched its behavior. Another suggested a clever hoax: magnets or hidden mechanisms, but the Bettses insisted they'd never tampered with it. And then there's the eerie postscript: after months of scrutiny, the sphere vanished from a locked lab, reappearing mysteriously back on the Betts property. Was it returned by shadowy officials, or did it, as the family believed, find its own way home? Decades later, the Betts sphere remains an enigma. Its very existence challenges the boundary between technology and the inexplicable. Whether a relic of human engineering pushed beyond its limits or something far stranger, one thing's certain: it refused to play by the rules. And perhaps that's the most unsettling truth of all. Some mysteries don't just defy explanation. They defy the very laws we thought governed our world. From vanished villages to dancing plagues, from phantom broadcasts to cursed manuscripts, these 25 events share one unshakable truth: some mysteries refuse to stay solved. They linger at the edges of history, whispering that for all our advancements, there are still riddles without answers, phenomena that slip through the cracks of science and logic. What ties them together isn't just their strangeness, but the way they expose our deepest cravings, the need to wonder, to question, to stare into the dark and dare it to stare back. Consider the patterns. Time and again, these cases reveal humanity's struggle to reconcile the tangible with the inexplicable. The Tunguska Event reminds us how fragile our understanding of the cosmos truly is, while the Voynich Manuscript taunts us with knowledge just out of reach. The Dyatlov Pass and the Aurang Medan whisper of forces, natural or otherwise, that operate beyond our comprehension. And then there are the encounters that feel personal, even intimate, like the Black Monk's violent hauntings or the Gibbons twins' psychic bond, where the line between mind and mystery blurs beyond recognition. But perhaps the most fascinating thread is how these stories evolve. The Philadelphia experiment began as whispered rumor, then hardened into legend. The zodiac ciphers transformed from taunts into cultural artifacts. Even the Bet sphere, a single strange object, became a mirror reflecting our fears of the unknown. These aren't just historical footnotes, they're living narratives, reshaped by every generation that grapples with them. So where do we go from here? Science will undoubtedly unravel some of these enigmas. Maybe one day we'll crack the Voynich's code or pinpoint the true cause of the dancing plague. Yet others might forever resist explanation, not because the answers don't exist, but because they belong to realms we've yet to discover, or may never fully understand. That's the thrill, isn't it? The possibility that out there, in the shadows of our world, something still defies the rules. Which of these mysteries will be the next to fall? Could AI finally decode the Zodiac's remaining ciphers? Will archaeologists unearth proof of what happened at Hinterkaifeck? Or are some truths destined to remain just beyond our fingertips, eternal reminders that the universe is stranger than we dare imagine? The choice is yours to keep digging. After all, history's greatest discoveries often start with a single question, and the courage to chase it into the unknown. So tell me, which of these stories haunts you the most? And more importantly, what will you do about it?